I'd like to talk about the way in which the the harmonized sales tax was introduced into British Columbia. I'm almost certain that it will become a part of the curriculum in the public administration colleges across Canada, because it was a miserable failure in the way in which it was introduced. And it's a very, very important program that that BC should have moved on with, but did not, and very nearly brought down the government because of it. So it will be a subject for discussion, I'm almost sure, at the university level in public administration. Let me just take a few minutes to talk about why the harmonized sales tax should have been introduced and was not. The program that it was replacing was a provincial sales tax, which was a tax on a tax on a tax, and it was a job killer. And I think the government did a very, very poor job of explaining it to the public. The harmonized sales tax is a value-added tax. In other words, taxes that have already been paid are taken into account in determining what the tax will be in the future. So you don't get a tax on a tax on a tax. Let me just take a moment to give you an example. Let's say a company in British Columbia manufactures bolts. Here's a bolt right here. And let's say it sells that bolt for $1. Well, of course, it has to add 7% sales tax to the bolt when it sells it to, let's say, a company that manufactures engines. And so the company that has a plant that makes engine, and it sells that engine for $1,000, and it includes the bolt that it's already paid a 7% tax on. And when the engine is sold, again, a 7% tax is paid on it, including the $1 bolt. So you're now up to 14 cents tax on that bolt. So now let's say the engine is purchased by a company that manufactures grain augers for farmers, and it attaches its engine to the grain auger, and once it's all complete, it sells it to a farm machinery dealership, and it adds a 7% tax on the whole value, which includes the $1 bolt. So now we're up to 21-cent tax on this $1 bolt. And the farm machinery dealership finally sells it to a farmer who will use it to elevate his grain. And when the farmer pays for the grain auger, 7% tax is attached, which includes the $1 bolt that was included in the engine. So we're now up to 28-cent tax, 28-cent tax on a $1 bolt. Now, had that same transaction occurred in Alberta, where there's no provincial sales tax, there would be no tax at all. So if you were in the business of trying to manufacture bolts or engines or grain augers, where do you think you would locate? You would not locate in British Columbia, you would locate in Alberta, or some of the states in the US where there is no provincial sales tax. Now, it's quite true that if you have the harmonized sales tax in British Columbia, and the government needs the tax to pay for its operations, it's true that there would be a 7% tax on the bolt. But once the 7% tax is paid, that's it. It's taken into account in the future transactions. So instead of being a 28-cent tax on a $1 bolt, it's only a 7% tax. So it would have meant that companies in British Columbia, although they would have been at a disadvantage over Alberta companies, at least they're not looking at a huge 28-cent tax on a $1 bolt. So if you can appreciate the issue there, I think you'd understand why you will not see manufacturing occurring in British Columbia when there are states and provinces nearby that do not have a tax on a tax on a tax. Now, there are some other features that are quite disturbing. The Government of Canada recognized that in order for Canada to be competitive on the world basis, we need to get to a value-added tax. Now, that's what they have in Britain. There's no sales tax at all in the US. And so if we want to be competitive with these other jurisdictions, we needed to get to this this harmonized sales tax. So they said to the provinces that have still not signed on, BC, they said, we will give you $1.6 billion, $1.6 billion if you will adopt the harmonized sales tax. Now that works out to about $350 for every man, woman, and child. So a family of 4, husband, wife, and 2 children, the government of Canada was saying, we will give you $1,400 if you will convert to the harmonized sales tax. That's how important we think it is. And BC had agreed to do that, and now we have to pay back to the government of Canada $1.6 billion. So every family is going to have to reach into their pocket and write a check for $1,400, or alternatively, get it added to the provincial debt, which is the same thing, but it's $1,400. Now, the other thing is, we now have to hire back 300 tax collectors, because we have to now, previously, under the harmonized sales tax, the federal government would have done the tax audits on the various companies. But now that we have a provincial sales tax back again, it means that the province has to hire back 300 civil servants to be tax collectors. So if you assume $100,000 per tax collector, and it's probably more than that, because because they're going to have to drive around, there's going to be car expenses, meals, all the rest of it, so it'll be at least $100,000 per person. So we're looking at $30 million per year, not a one-time cost, an ongoing annual cost for the tax collectors. Now, had we stayed with the harmonized sales tax, it would have meant that we could have saved that money, or alternatively, we could have hired 150 teachers or 150 nurses, and 150 nurses, as opposed to 300 tax collectors. Now, I suspect that almost everybody in BC would say that it's more important to have teachers and nurses than it is to have tax collectors. But in their wisdom, the people of BC decided, no, we're going to go back to the old system, because we don't like to have to pay a tax when we have a restaurant meal or whatever it might have been. We've had the harmonized sales tax for a couple of years, and going back to this old system, I just think it's an absolute abomination that this has happened. Now, everyone in BC will know that the public had an opportunity to vote, and they voted out by a margin of roughly 55% against introducing the new tax, and 45% being in favor of it. So that's relatively close. 10-point spread, 5% difference would have swung the vote the other way. If I was advising Christy Clark, I would have her make the rounds, because she is an excellent person in explaining things. There's no doubt about that. She brought the Liberals won primarily because she was able to be a good campaigner and very good in the debates and making her points. And I think she needs a $1 bolt, and she needs to go around talking about the reasons why we're going to be losing business because of this, talking about having to repay to the government of Canada $1.6 billion, $350 for every man, woman, and child, talking about how we could have hired 150 teachers plus 150 nurses, but now we're going to have to hire 300 tax collectors. I think she could do an excellent job of making the case to the public that we're going to have to go back and reintroduce this program. And she, if anyone could do it, she would be able to do it. And finally, if you need one more point to make, now this is getting into the nasty side, but the government of Quebec has had a program similar to the harmonized sales tax for many years, for about 20 years actually. And when they found out that British Columbia and Ontario were going to be given money to introduce a harmonized sales tax, they said, well, we didn't get our money when we introduced this, so we need money. So the government of Canada gave Quebec $2 billion for no reason other than to say, well, we offered Ontario and BC, and we wouldn't want Quebec to be without, so we're going to give Quebec $2 billion because you introduced this a similar program 20 years ago, even though it isn't completely the same as the Government of Canada program, but it is reasonably similar. So here we have a situation where BC has to give back to the Government of Canada $1.6 billion, $350 for every man, woman, and child, and the money is going to be going directly to the people in Quebec because they did this 20 years ago. I just think it's an abomination in BC that we've done this, and I think Christy Clark should say that it's too important to leave it this way. We're going to go back to the public. We're going to explain it, and we're going to have another vote on it, and this time it's going to pass. And I just can't see how the BC residents could be so stupid to vote this thing out a second time.